Hey everyone, this is Steve from BJJ Mental Models, and I've got a bonus episode for you that I think you're going to enjoy. This episode is a recording that we did with Avery Lorenzato from Golden Jiu Jitsu in Colorado about how you should play the sport of Jiu Jitsu, as opposed to fighting, as opposed to looking at this as a death match, bringing a spirit of play into the gym and using science-backed, evidence-based practices to do just that. It's a great conversation that'll benefit coaches who are looking to set the tone in their gym and also students who are looking to figure out what a good gym looks like. The backstory behind this episode is that we're in the process of rolling out a new level of services at BJJ Mental Models to support jiu-jitsu businesses. So for example, gym owners, but really anyone who's trying to make a living in the sport of jiu-jitsu. The way we're doing this is by bringing our platform and our expertise in business, sales, marketing, and product to gyms and to other businesses to help them fill the gaps in their business processes that they might not have the skill set or the time or the interest to do themselves. So for example, if you need help with lead generation or marketing or sales or organizing your website or tech or all of that stuff, we're rolling out a series of professional services to do that for people. So we've been working with Avery on this, and one of the things that we've been doing as we build out a new sales funnel and pipeline and automated email drip campaign for his potential customers is we sat down and we recorded a really great conversation about why you should play the sport of jiu-jitsu. The content, I thought, was really good, to the point where I think it deserves to be shared beyond just that one use case. So I'm sharing it here today. So please do enjoy this episode. It's a good long chat with Avery Lorenzato about why you should play the sport of jiu-jitsu. Let me know what you think. And if you're in a similar situation to Avery, where you're looking for some support growing your jiu-jitsu business, maybe you're getting stalled out, you're having trouble growing, you don't know what to do, shoot me a message and I'd be happy to help you out, just like I've helped out Avery here. You can contact me through the contact form at bjjmentalmodels.com, or you can just email me at steve@bjjmentalmodels.com, or you can find us on social media, primarily Instagram, where our handle is BJJ Mental Models. So here you go. Enjoy this great chat with Avery Lorenzato from Golden Jiu Jitsu about why you should play the sport. Hey everyone, my name is Steve Kwan from BJJ Mental Models. I am here today with Avery Lorenzato from Golden Jiu Jitsu. Avery, how's it going, sir?
Going pretty well. Just enjoying my day, nice and caffeinated, and excited to talk about people that are new to grappling.
Well, let's do that. I mean, I think that's as good a place as any to start. The purpose of this is we wanted to put together a conversation and an info package for people who are looking at martial arts they want to train, especially jiu-jitsu, and decide if this is something that they really want to do. You've got a lot of insights on this. You speak very well on this. And of course, you've got a great gym there. So I thought this would be an awesome opportunity to unpack all of that. Over to you, though. Why don't you tell everyone who you are and let's talk about the gym a little bit.
Yeah, so my name's Avery. We have a gym in Golden, Colorado. We set out with the goal of just making jiu-jitsu more accessible to people and trying to be the best at getting people that are brand new to jiu-jitsu to purple belt. I feel like that's probably often one of the most underlooked aspects in jiu-jitsu, especially like speaking as a coach. It's oftentimes a lot easier to train people that are already advanced, but I think that it's often the most fun to train people that are brand new, and you just get to be part of their journey and see them accessing all of the benefits of jiu-jitsu and learning how to move their body efficiently, and having fun. And you just get to be part of that progress that's just so steep where they get so good so quickly. And yeah, we have a small gym downtown Golden, Colorado, right on Main Street, which is really, really pleasant, and heavy emphasis on our fundamentals program.
Amazing, man. Well, we will talk more about the gym in a bit, but for now, let's talk about what jiu-jitsu is. I remember I started training jiu-jitsu as of this recording about 16 years ago. And like many people who have gotten into jiu-jitsu, I would advocate that for those who fall in love with it, it's a life-changing experience for more reasons than people might expect. But I'm going to turn this over to you. How would you explain jiu-jitsu to a person who's never done it before? What is it, and why would someone want to train something like this as opposed to other martial arts they might have access to?
So I would say the biggest thing is jujitsu is a vehicle to be able to bring confidence, build confidence, get in shape, get fitter. A lot of people trying to learn self-defense and make new friends. And I think that those are all great reasons to train jujitsu. For me personally, it's the most fun game I've ever played. So I think those are kind of the reasons for looking at jujitsu and kind of what makes it so great. So as far as what jujitsu is, it's a type of submission grappling art. And there's countless types of combat sports and martial arts, but jujitsu is really notable for four main reasons. And those reasons are like, number one, it actually works. There's a lot of martial arts that legitimately don't work, primarily because they don't do live sparring. And without live sparring, there's no way to evaluate whether or not a technique works or if it's fake. Two, it's relatively safe to train. Out of all the combat sports that actually work, it's the most lifetime combat sport, meaning that people just still play the game late in life. And I know a lot of people that are in their 60s that are still on the mats. Number three, the technical skill correlates more to success compared to other martial arts. So like while being skilled helps in all martial arts, I would say that you see the biggest gap in results in ground grappling. So like if you've been training for a long time, you can beat people that are more athletic and younger and faster and more mobile. And that's kind of like one of the big selling points, what's always been one of the big selling points of jiu-jitsu. And then lastly, it's just an incredibly complex and rich game with a seemingly infinite number of rabbit holes that you can go down. And that makes the game a whole lot of fun. And it's the reason that many people like myself, and I believe like yourself, are so drawn to it. But all in all, it's essentially the best compromise for training, something that works while decreasing the risk of injury. And most importantly, it's just the most fun combat sport you can play.
Yeah, I think that is a great way to look at it. When I decided to start training jiu-jitsu, I had it in my head that I wanted to be a martial artist, and I looked at all of the options out there. And the thing about Brazilian jiu-jitsu, or as it's often just called now, jiu-jitsu, that really stuck with me is that it's a true self-defense art. Many other martial arts are about fighting and inflicting damage and violence. If you get into boxing or kickboxing, you're ultimately trying to knock your opponent out. If you're talking about judo, you're trying to slam your opponent onto the ground with a throw. But the thing about jiu-jitsu is that if you do it right, it's not about escalating violence, it's about de-escalating. The whole goal in a jiu-jitsu round is to hold someone in a position where they can't escape until they have to give up. You're not trying to break your opponent, you're trying to checkmate your opponent so that they have to give up of their own. And that natural self-defense aspect of jiu-jitsu really resonated with me when I came to the sport. To this day, it's one of the reasons I recommend jiu-jitsu over pretty much everything else. And as you brought up, I think that self-defense aspect of the sport translates to the psychology of how we train it. In terms of combat sports, is relatively safe, right? As you mentioned, something that people might not realize is there's no striking in jiu-jitsu. You do not have to worry about getting punched in the face or kicked in the head. It's purely a grappling art, but still at the same time, it's a grappling art that is tremendously effective. You talked about earlier martial arts that are kind of BS, that don't really work. And a lot of the times traditional martial arts get kind of a bad rap because they don't have enough live sparring to really practice effectively and make it something you could use in a real altercation if you needed to. Jiu-jitsu, because of the nature of the live sparring, it's real training that you can use. And that's part of the reason why, even to this day, jiu-jitsu is such a key cornerstone of things like MMA in the UFC. It's just a very powerful toolkit that's actually proven to work while still keeping people relatively safe, both you and your opponent as well.
So, like you said, all grappling disciplines are non-striking martial arts, so no punching or kicking is allowed, where the goal is to control your opponent, right? And grappling is as old as humans are. We've been fighting and grappling our entire existence. And actually from like pottery and sculpture, we can date grappling back to at least 2000 BC. So like 4,000 years ago, there's a long history of grappling. As far as what grappling is, we can really split grappling sports in half between those that include submissions and those that don't. So most wrestling arts are grappling without submissions. Wrestling is all these wrestling sports are focused on getting a standing opponent to the ground. And there's a huge array of styles with different rule sets and different attire, including Greco-Roman wrestling, American folk style, freestyle sumo, Irish Glima, Turkish oil wrestling. And on the other side of the coin, we have grappling styles that do include submissions like catch as catch can, sambo, judo, and jiu-jitsu. And there's a huge overlap between all of these grappling disciplines, between shared techniques, naming conventions, submission holds, and more. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, for instance, is really a hybrid sport of Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. There's catch wrestling influence there, judo, and more. And each of those sports are hybrids of other disciplines and turns. And since the internet, this hybridization and kind of cross-pollination of different styles has become even more prevalent. And nowadays, I think the distinction between techniques and positions are a little bit more blurred, and it can be harder to attribute the ideas and moves. That being said, all of these, like you said, are maybe battle tested is not the best word, but they're trained under pressure. And I think it's, we should have some empathy for sports that maybe don't work in terms of history. I've heard, I don't know if you've heard this, but I've heard that a lot of those sports like karate and other things have been outlawed at certain times as martial arts. And like capoeira, I believe, is one where it was like, okay, this is no longer legal to train as a martial art. You can't spar it. So it became more kata focused, more almost like choreographed dance focused for learning.
Yeah. I am not an expert in the history of grappling, but I have heard this as well. The legend of capoeira is that it was kind of created in response to the fact that I believe some people in Brazil were not allowed to actually train martial arts. So they kind of invented this other one to skirt the rules. But you're right, grappling is an art that is as old as time. Jiu-jitsu is far from the only popular grappling martial art. Judo is a grappling martial art. You mentioned wrestling, amateur wrestling. Women's wrestling is one of the fastest growing sports in America as of this recording. It's also a tremendously popular sport and self-defense tool. The main thing with wrestling, though, is, as you mentioned, it tends to be something that people do in their younger years. It requires a lot of athleticism, and there isn't really a long-term lifestyle component of wrestling. Most people cycle out of that by the time they go off into, the real world and get past university. Whereas jiu-jitsu, one of the beautiful things about it is that it is a life activity. You can do it quite safely well into your elder years. I mean, Helio Gracie, right? A legendary grappler, one of the people credited as being kind of one of the founders of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as we know it. Legend has it that he was basically grappling until the day he died, and he was in his 90s. The thing I love about Jiu-Jitsu is that you can scale it up or down by intensity level based on what you want, and that makes it really a martial art that is great for everyone. It's kind of very inclusive in that way, and there's always room for people to accommodate how they want to train jiu-jitsu. It's not just a bunch of young athletic kids, but there's a lot of older folks, moms, dads, seniors, retirees as well. It's just a really cool, open tent sport that a lot of people participate in.
Totally. And I really think that there's a couple of distinct reasons why jiu-jitsu tends to be that lifetime grappling sport in comparison to sports like wrestling. And I think the number one thing is we tend to be a lot more playful when we train. But I think that a lot of that is a byproduct of the things that really make our sport different. It's like, the fact that if your opponent surrenders due to a submission hold, it's an instant win, right? And, this, I know this, but like just for our listeners, this is called tapping. When someone submits, it's called tapping. It's the same as crying uncle when you're a kid. You can tap by verbally saying the word tap, physically tapping your opponent with your hand, or tapping the mat. And that is what we look for above all else. And it's a lot easier. It's a lot higher percentage to be able to submit someone when you're both on the ground, right? And so that changes. That's like a big driving force of the sport. The second is that we don't reset to standing positions. And that's actually probably the biggest contrast with other grappling disciplines. Judo, sambo, and most wrestling sports reset to standing for various criteria. And there's a lot less emphasis on that ground grappling for all of those sports. And that means like when two people are standing and you fall to the ground, just there is going to be more of an impact on your bodies. And that means that there's higher risk of injury. And that's probably, those two things are the main reasons why wrestling is not considered a lifetime sport. Those are the main reasons why it gets harder and harder to train as we get older. And the third I would say is that like most grappling sports, or many grappling sports maybe, pinning is the main objective. It's just getting someone to the mat. And jiu-jitsu doesn't award points necessarily for pinning. We award points for certain pins, leg centered pins mainly, or not mainly, entirely leg centered pins. But regardless of that, all of these three things result in our sport being played when at least one person is on the ground, and there's a comparatively much larger emphasis on submissions compared to other grappling sports. So those three things just guide our sport to being on the ground where there's less chance of impact or less risk of impact and just less impacts overall on our bodies, because there's just less height that we're dropping if we are swept or we're changing positions, etc. And there's much higher emphasis on controls that lead to submissions, which are often, I would say, more playful in comparison to controls with the purpose of just putting someone's back on the mat. Does that sound right to you?
Absolutely. Now, I would ask you maybe to clarify for people, if someone is listening to this and they're not familiar with jiu-jitsu, they're probably in the same state that I and so many other people were when they started, which is not quite understanding the distinction between jiu-jitsu and a lot of the other martial arts. So I would turn that over to you. If someone was looking to start a martial art and they looked around at what's near them, and there's a jiu-jitsu school, there's a judo school, there's a taekwondo school, a karate school, how do you kind of explain the differences to those so that people can kind of more intelligently understand why they would want to choose jiu-jitsu?
So I would say, your taekwondo, your karate school are going to be focused on striking, which we've talked about. Your judo school is going to spend 80+% of their time focused on getting someone from standing to the ground. That's the emphasis. And your jiu-jitsu school is going to spend 80+% of the time focused on controlling and submitting people once they're on the ground. So I would say that's kind of the high level differences in terms of what it means to you as someone who's looking to start a martial art. I would say that jiu-jitsu is going to be the one that has the least impact on your body. It's the safest one to train, and it's I really just, I struggle to come back to something other than this, but it's the most fun. Like when you're not punished for being on the ground inherently, right? When it's not necessarily a bad thing to have your back on the mat, the positions just open up. There's so many more positions that are practically played in jiu-jitsu compared to any other martial art. So, guard is kind of a difficult concept in some ways, but it's like anytime I'm on my back or my butt and my legs are being used to grapple a opponent that has height on me, either they're kneeling or standing, right? That is a loss in most martial arts, most grappling martial arts. In jiu-jitsu, it's not. It's considered a fairly neutral position if your goal is to get a submission. And it can even be dominant for the person on bottom. So when we have that, the game just vastly expands and gets, I wouldn't say more complicated, but more complex, because there's just more variants, more options. And that's what I think really is that big impetus, that big drive for people to train it, is because it's so much more fun. I don't know. What would you say to that answer?
I think that's a great answer. The big thing that I always tell people to understand is that when you're talking about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or Jiu-Jitsu as you might call it, you're generally describing combat without striking. So people are sometimes hesitant to get into a sport like this because they're worried about getting beat up, right? Now, don't get me wrong. Jiu-Jitsu is hard. It's intense. It's an amazing workout. There is a lot of struggle involved, but there's no striking. The idea is that you use pure grappling techniques to take someone to the floor and subdue them. If you want a visual of what this would look like, think of what a police restraint hold looks like, where a police officer has to take someone to the ground and hold them there until they give up without trying to hurt them. In fact, there's often a lot of crossover between jiu-jitsu and police tactics, and there are emerging movements right now to bring more jiu-jitsu into police operations because it's generally less combative than actually trying to hurt someone. So that's another way that I like to think of jiu-jitsu. It's probably also important to identify that even within jiu-jitsu, there are different flavors of jiu-jitsu as well. You will often hear people talk about Japanese jiu-jitsu, which is kind of a different variant of jiu-jitsu. It went over through a different evolutionary tree. It tends to be quite different from what we would call Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So if you're interested in what we're talking about here today, I mean, of course, your number one option should be go to Golden Jiu Jitsu. But the other option is if you're ever unsure, you can ask, are we talking about Brazilian jiu-jitsu or Japanese jiu-jitsu? That's another important distinction. The other thing I would bring up too is that jiu-jitsu is tremendously wonderful for smaller people. The thing they don't tell you about a lot of other martial arts for self-defense is that at the end of the day, there's some assumption that you at least have some size and strength behind you. If you want to do judo or a striking art, you are going to be much more effective if you're big and strong. And the problem with that from a self-defense perspective is the kind of people who are more likely to need self-defense training are the people who tend to be smaller and weaker, right? If I'm going to get jumped in an alley, I don't expect it to be by someone who is a foot shorter than me and 50 pounds lighter. I expect it's going to be someone who thinks based on size alone, they can do something about this. And one of the cool things about jiu-jitsu is that because it focuses so much on leverage and fighting from the bottom and from bad positions, it's a great skill set to have if you want to learn to defend yourself as a smaller or weaker person. Just recently, as of this recording, a woman named Adele Fornerino just won the largest jiu-jitsu tournament in the world in what's called no-gi. And she won it not just in her own weight class, but in the open weight division. And what that means is no weight limits. You would rarely see something like that in boxing because it's just way too dangerous for two people who have a weight difference of 50 to 100 pounds to fight. It's just very clear how that's going to go down. But in jiu-jitsu, it's not always a guarantee that the bigger person won. Adele was coming in from one of the smallest divisions, and I think she might have been maybe the smallest, if not one of the smallest athletes in that division. She went into the open weight division with the best in the world and still won. So one of the cool things about jiu-jitsu is its power for people who don't have all of the natural athletic gifts. So if that describes you, you may be one of the many people who fall in love with jiu-jitsu because it's really built around your body type and the tools that you do have at your disposal.
And just to add to that, my coach, I have, I think, probably 40 to 50 pounds of weight advantage on my coach, and he kicks my butt regularly with no problem whatsoever. Although he's just so talented. I don't know if I'd be able to beat him in boxing either. But you did bring up a great point about kind of types of jiu-jitsu. There are a lot of subtypes of jiu-jitsu. One of the main distinctions, or really the main distinction in all jiu-jitsu types are the rule sets. While it's all the same sport, each time you change the rules, you change the way that the game is played. And one of the biggest distinctions between two families of jiu-jitsu is based on the clothing that you wear while you're grappling. So the gi is the traditional uniform, and it's basically a kimono that you can grab a hold of. No gi is done in clothing that you can't grab. And that changes the game a lot, but they're still the same game in my opinion. But being able to grab someone's clothes, there's just countless positions, movement pathways, and submissions that utilize the gi that just don't exist in no-gi jiu-jitsu. And there are pros and cons to each. I will say that generally slower isometric strength game-based players tend to find more success with the additional friction of the gi. Offense is considered to be easier in the gi. Defense is considered to be a little bit more difficult in the gi. And no-gi tends to lend itself to increased movement just because there's less friction and less gripping options. But beyond just the gi and no-gi variations, we can really talk a lot about, there's jiu-jitsu for MMA, there's jiu-jitsu for self-defense, there's sport jiu-jitsu, and those are all big distinctions. I would say as a preface, you can make jiu-jitsu what you want it to. You can train for what you're interested in, even in a standard class. If you train, MMA, you'll see that the grappling context is wildly different. Unsurprisingly, striking being part of the game significantly changes the game. So jiu-jitsu for MMA, there's much more of an emphasis on standing up to your feet when you're on bottom and preventing someone from standing up when you're on top. So You could train like at our gym and just try and alter your game to where if you're interested in more MMA aspects, you could train by a focus on if you're on bottom, you're trying to be on top. As far as self-defense, I would say most people that market jiu-jitsu for self-defense often fall into the trap of training techniques without live sparring. Without live sparring, there's no way to find out if something works or doesn't work. Just period, no caveats. Every time you perform a technique or transition between positions or even apply submissions, it's slightly different. And you have to get good at making things work on the fly, not drilling some perfect execution. And you don't get good at that dead drilling on non-resisting opponents. So at the end of the day, if you want to prioritize self-defense above all else, I think an MMA gym might make the most sense. To me, that's not worth it because that's not why I train, and my personal priorities are to avoid injury and not get CTE. You can train jiu-jitsu for self-defense in terms of same things. You don't have to play some of these aspects of the game that are considered more like quote unquote sport jiu-jitsu that would not work in a self-defense application. And lastly, one thing I do want to say about this, a lot of people say that they want to train no-gi because they want to prioritize self-defense and they believe that it's more realistic. As someone who is trained in a t-shirt and shorts while allowing grips, you can really control someone from a hoodie or a t-shirt. You can. I would argue that you have more control of someone wearing a hoodie compared to wearing a gi. So I don't necessarily agree with that argument. Lastly, sport jiu-jitsu. Some people do talk about sport jiu-jitsu with kind of a derogatory connotation because they're saying that you're studying things that won't work in the streets. First off, like if training for the streets is your top priority, definitely MMA might make more sense. Otherwise, you don't have to play any style of grappling that you don't want to. You're in charge of your training and you can pick and choose what positions and ideas you want to incorporate into your game. And like you said earlier, jiu-jitsu does work. It might not be as effective as if you also added striking, but if you're prioritizing being able to grapple and control someone without striking, there is no better option in my opinion.
I would echo that. I think that the most important thing, regardless of what you choose to train, if you're interested in the effectiveness of the art, is training with real resistance. And the beauty of jiu-jitsu is because of the goal, which is to hold someone down and immobilize them, you tend to be able to train with a lot more resistance than if you were doing something like kickboxing, for instance. If you train a striking art, the challenge is if you're going to train with high resistance, you're taking a lot of blows to the head in training. In jiu-jitsu, you can train this relatively safely at a high intensity, and that's part of what makes it so useful. People do sometimes get very caught up on, well, should I put on the kimono, called the gi, as you mentioned, or should I do no gi, which is kind of closer to wrestling with submissions? And honestly, there really is no right or wrong answer. Many gyms will offer both of these, and my suggestion is always train a bit of both of them. If you fall in love with one and you decide that you only want to train one variant, then do that. Do whatever you want. They're both completely fine. They're both completely valid. It's just a preference thing. I like training in the gi personally because, as you mentioned, when people can grab onto your clothes and your fabric, it adds a whole other element that people might not expect. If you ever train with people who train mostly in no-gi and then they throw on the jacket for the first time, they can get really messed up because they're not used to people just being able to grab them and hold them from wherever. Think of watching a soccer hooligan fight where people are grabbing people's shirts and pulling them over their heads. You can be an amazing combat athlete, but if you can't deal with someone pulling your shirt over your head, you're going to have issues. And the gi gives you more awareness of how people can use your clothes against you. And I think that is a useful skill to have. You also talked about sport jiu-jitsu. So many people get into jiu-jitsu for self-defense or fitness, but there's also a wide and growing and robust sport community in jiu-jitsu. There are world championships in both the gi and no-gi. There are many high-profile leagues that you can use if you really are a competitive athlete and you want to make a run in this sport. You've got a lot of options. And of course, if your interest is MMA, such as the UFC or another fight league like that, jiu-jitsu is also a great onboarding way to get into that. No requirement though, right? It's a foundational sport for MMA, but it absolutely is not the same as MMA. And I think that's something that is important to understand. MMA has It is mixed martial arts. So it brings in things like boxing and kickboxing and wrestling. And that's why you see people striking on the ground. In pure jiu-jitsu, you don't see that.
So you had mentioned being able to train at higher resistance. And while that is definitely true, I do want to add this caveat in that we prioritize playfulness above all else in all of our programs. I think that playfulness, that mentality is the most important thing when you're looking at skill acquisition and longevity in any sport.
Yeah, I would agree with you. One of the tenets that you will hear many people say in jiu-jitsu is keep it playful. It's kind of a mantra in the sport. And this is somewhat unique to jiu-jitsu. You don't hear a lot of other sports, especially combat sports, talk about this. They tend to look at things more as a fight. But there is emerging research and emerging reasons to believe that a more playful approach is better for skill acquisition. And that's kind of counterintuitive, but it turns out that if you're just going in there and you're trying to win the round every round, you're turning every round into a fight, you increase the risk of injury. You probably run the risk of not building the kind of friendships that you would build if you were having a more playful approach. But also just from a pure skill acquisition perspective, if I am in a combat match with you and my goal is to win, I'm not going to be very experimental. I'm not going to try new things. I'm going to stick to what I'm comfortable with, and I'm going to do what I'm used to. And what that really means is I'm living inside my comfort zone. So trying to win instead of trying to play is a problem because it prevents you from exploring the development of new skills. So you will hear this talked about in many other sports, like the invasion sports like soccer or football. They may talk about kind of a more playful, exploratory approach because you're not necessarily trying to win when you're in practice. You win when you're having an actual game out there and there's something on the line. But when you're just in training, it doesn't make sense to try to be winning all the time because that can hinder your growth. So for all of these reasons, you will hear people in jiu-jitsu say keeping it playful is key. And it sounds like that's one of the things at Golden Jiu Jitsu that you're really trying to cultivate is this playful nature of jiu-jitsu. And if there's anything that I missed there, I would be happy to hear you expand on why playfulness is important for a sport like this, as opposed to trying to just go in and win all the time.
Yeah, so it's funny actually. Our welcome guide to new members, we actually link to 2 podcasts from you. The one that you did with Alexander Darwin about keeping it playful, and the podcast that you did with Joseph Chen about getting better faster, where you talk about kind of growth versus performance and those being opposing goals. So those are like huge tenets in our program, both for fundamentals and for advanced. And I really love the tennis ball analogy that you talked about with Rob Bernanke about just trying to, like when you're playing tennis and you're learning, the goal is to rally as much as possible. You just want to hit the ball back and forth. You want to keep that rally going. You're not necessarily trying to win the point. So when you're learning in jiu-jitsu, when we have new people, our goal is to just keep that rally going. It's not to completely shut someone's game down. It's not to let them never get near that tennis ball. It's just, how do we keep movement going and make it fun? And that's what it's all about. That's how you get good. Like you talked about, there's all this new overwhelming evidence that's showing like keeping it playful, learning to be playful is a core part of skill development and growth. But I think that does bring us maybe to a good point. I know we could talk about how we do things at Golden Jiu Jitsu, but I think maybe even before that, it might make sense to just talk about a little bit more about why you should play the sport. We mentioned earlier that, there's building confidence, making new friends, getting in shape, being fit, and the fun, engaging parts of the game. So as far as like why you should play the sport, for me, number one, the thing I always tell everyone is it's a problem-solving game that tricks me into exercising. Like the puzzles that I encounter while grappling are the most dynamic and varied and fun out of any sport I've ever played. And I love puzzles. I love playing games. I love chess. I'm pretty proud I finally got up to 1400 ELO. And I play Go, which I'm not sure if you've heard of. It's often referred to as being similar to chess. It's the Asian board game with black and white stones. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Cool. So I've gotten pretty good at that. That I'm a one dan in, which the ELO system isn't exactly correlating, but I'm pretty decent at that. But to me, jujitsu is like playing those games. It scratches that itch to just play games and problem solve. However, it's to me a lot healthier physically than sitting on my couch binging blitz games on chess.com. So that's like the number one thing for me is it's just like, this is the most fun game ever. But besides that, the community in jiu-jitsu has been such a unique experience in my life. Just the level of community found in a jiu-jitsu gym. I've made a lot more friends grappling compared to yoga studios or weightlifting spots or rock climbing. And I think that's largely because we put so much trust in each other every day, and that trust builds deep connections over time. I'm a huge fan of Ryan Hall. I think he said it best. He said, every day we train, we hold our partner's safety and even their life in the palm of our hand. I think some people treat that somewhat flippantly and they're like, oh, it's not so serious, this, that, and the other. But I do think that there's more connections in jiu-jitsu gym. There's this deeper level of community compared to pretty much anything else I've ever done. In addition, I feel like there's a lot of mental health benefits. First and foremost, there's a lot of evidence that exercise is a huge component of mental health. I don't claim to be an expert on it whatsoever, but my own experience has also been that I don't mentally feel well if I'm not exercising. And additionally, I think that humans are at our core, we're adaptable problem solvers, and there's a fundamental itch there to solve problems. And while I don't claim to know much about mental health, I do think that there's a relationship between anxiety and drive to solve problems and overcome hurdles. At least for me, every time I'm stressed, the surest way to feel better is to be productive. And whether that's lifting weights or cleaning my apartment or working on the gym or whatever else, feeling like I've moved the needle on something is one of the most important things. And there's a lot of magic almost in simulating these life or death situations that makes a lot of other stressors in life seem less important. And then again, with mental health, it's just being part of a community. Those interpersonal relationships are a huge part of a healthy life. And I'd be curious, you've been training for 16 years. Would you say similar things in terms of the community aspect and the game aspect and the mental health?
100%. Jiu-jitsu is really one of the only physical activities that I truly enjoy doing. There are some people who just love every sport they do, and for them, athletics comes easier, and I sometimes envy those people. But for a lot of us, we just don't really enjoy things like going to the gym. Maybe we don't really enjoy traditional team sports. We're not sporty people. That described me, but jiu-jitsu I fell in love with. And for me, it made it so much easier to get physical exercise, to go out there and get my workout in without feeling like it was actual work. It was something I would have done for fun, even if there were no physical benefits to do. You also talked about skill acquisition. The thing I love about jiu-jitsu is, especially early on, you can measurably feel yourself getting better at something useful. And that's a benefit you don't get from a lot of other activities. When I'm lifting weights, I don't necessarily feel like, man, I'm really leveling up in my skill here. I know that there is an aspect of skill to it for sure. But with jiu-jitsu, over a relatively short period of time, you can measurably feel yourself getting better. You can see results for your training, and the feeling of mastery is good. The other thing, too, is that because jiu-jitsu gives us this great lab to try ideas and to experiment and to face resilience, it's really a powerful, like I said, a lab almost for testing out ideas that you can use in the rest of your life. And I know this sounds very hokey to people, but even though you're unlikely to really be using arm bars and pinning holes in your day-to-day life, well, maybe you are. I guess it depends on what your job is. But most of us won't be doing that. However, the practice of going into a room where we try to get good at something and we face friendly resistance from our teammates, and we get to explore and deal with how we work under pressure, how we stay calm and composed when we are challenged. All of these are very useful skills to build both on and off the jiu-jitsu mats. And so one of the things I have said is that I've never had to use the actual self-defense aspect of jiu-jitsu in my whole life. But all of the other things I've learned from jiu-jitsu, I use on an almost daily basis. And those were the benefits that I wouldn't have expected these touch on the things you talked about. I've met amazing friends through jiu-jitsu. I've built networks through jiu-jitsu. I have developed a lot of skills and improved my athletic ability through jiu-jitsu. You talked about just the improvement that it can have on your mental health. I mean, I would, like you said, I am not an expert here, and I would not go out of my way to claim that jiu-jitsu is magical or special in any way here. But there are a few things that stand out. One is that exercising of its own, like you said, is good for your mental health. But the other is that jiu-jitsu has this great camaraderie and team building and community aspect. And like you said, there's this great element of trust. When you can go in there and you can kind of spar with your friends, but you can trust that you're going to take care of each other. It really is a great feeling, and it builds a level of social connection that you just won't get working at an office and meeting people there. So I always tell people, I'm not going to say that jiu-jitsu is for everyone and that everyone needs to do it, but I do think at least one time, everyone should try jiu-jitsu. Some people might try it and not like it, and that's okay. But for the people who do try it and love it, it can be an absolutely life-changing practice. And so I really think it merits everyone to at least get up and go to at least one jiu-jitsu class and see if it's the kind of thing that they've been missing.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. And one other thing that a lot of people talk about is the confidence that it brings. I think a lot of that has to do with the mental health aspects that we talked about. A lot of it has to do with overcoming hurdles, with understanding, just being in bad positions and understanding I'm not going to just get out of this immediately. I'm going to chip away a couple percent at a time, try and slowly improve what the situation is, and just getting used to putting in the work, I think can be really, really great. And there's also a big benefit to just feeling a little bit less afraid of the unknown in terms of physical confrontations. I think training for as long as I have, I think it's, if anything, I'm less likely to ever get into a fight, but I'm not as afraid of fighting as I used to be. And I think that's a huge, huge aspect to it in terms of just like, there is that confidence of just like, I'm not as worried about it as I would have been otherwise.
Yep, absolutely. Now, an amazing place for jiu-jitsu is as a tool for helping your kids develop skills as well. Jiu-jitsu for kids is tremendously popular. I have friends who run jiu-jitsu gyms, and by far the biggest aspect of their gym is their kids program. What about kids? I mean, we've talked so far about grown-ups like us and how jiu-jitsu can kind of fill a missing puzzle piece in the puzzle that is our lives, but using this as a tool for kids is tremendously powerful. My daughter is in jiu-jitsu and she absolutely loves it. Why don't you talk a little bit about kids and how jiu-jitsu can be a tool to benefit them?
For sure. So one thing that's interesting here that I want to point out is that basically all mammals grapple, especially the young. All like you can see puppies, they grapple constantly, kittens grapple constantly, weasels, ferrets, every mammal grapples. And I think it's natural for kids to want to grapple. And I do think that there's an evolutionary reason for that drive to like be able to grapple safely and play. I think there's huge benefits there in terms of just social skills, interacting with each other's, learning how to play equitably, learning how to work almost as a team together, even when you're competing, and making sure that the other person's having fun. Developing communication skills when they're frustrated or upset is a huge part, how to navigate those issues because they will pop up. Learning how to deal with loss, learning how to win graciously, and physical literacy are probably the main things. As much as I think grappling is great for adults, but I take our kids program very seriously because to me, the kids program is, yes, of course I want to like have competent grapplers. I want the kids to get good at grappling, but more so than that, I see jiu-jitsu as just a incredibly powerful vehicle to learn all of these other skills and have time and a space to be able to practice those things that translate outside of the gym, that translate off the mats, that translate into how to deal with school projects and how to interact with each other on a playground or in any other sport, and one day down the road in work. So I really, really, really think that like jiu-jitsu for kids is like putting your kid in a jiu-jitsu program is one of the best things that you can possibly do for them to set them up for long-term success.
Yeah. I feel that completely. Jiu-jitsu is something I wish I had discovered much younger in my life than I did. I discovered it in my 20s, and I guess in retrospect I was lucky to discover it at all, and at least at such a still young age, but it's so great for kids, and I really wish it was something that I had taken up earlier.
Me
Um,
too. Me too.
any other closing thoughts on kind of the why of jiu-jitsu before we get into maybe how you do things at Golden Jiu Jitsu? Any other things that you wanted to tell people about what this martial art is, maybe what to expect or why they might want to train it?
Ooh, we can talk about more what to expect in a minute, but I feel like the biggest thing is expect to have fun and expect to play, expect to lose and have it not be a bad thing. Invest in that loss. I think we did pretty good on all of those whys, on the background of what it is and why it's such a good thing to do. So I guess let's dive into how we play the sport. We talked a lot about types of jujitsu earlier, and I would say if anything, we're probably a sport grappling based gym. That being said, we do have more standing wrestling game content in our programs than is commonly seen at most gyms. I think there are good arguments for playing standing wrestling games. If you're a grappler, you should be semi-comfortable in all grappling engagements, including standing ones. I normally tell people that we're a jiu-jitsu gym when people ask. I don't necessarily say Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Sometimes I jokingly call us an American jiu-jitsu gym. Sometimes I refer to it as submission grappling. At the end of the day, you can call it whatever you want. You can call it jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, grappling, submission wrestling. You can call it catch wrestling. I don't care. As long as when you come in, you're playful, we're good. We play a whole lot of games in class and are very playful in sparring. And many people at many gyms have this idea that like when visitors come in or new people come in, we want to prove that our jiu-jitsu is good. We want to make sure that, jiu-jitsu works. I know you've talked about this before in various podcasts about that, the way that we sell jiu-jitsu is that, if someone comes in, we beat them up, we go, make sure that they know that it's real good. And that's how they, that's what's going to make them want to learn. In our gym, I tell all of our students, our number one goal when we have new people, whether they've been training for 10 years or if it's their first day, I want them to prove to new people that our jiu-jitsu is playful and fun above all else. That really is the core identity of Golden Jiu Jitsu.
That's a really great thing to clarify here, because if someone has listened to this so far and they're on board, they've decided, okay, I'm done. I want to sign up for jiu-jitsu. How do I go about doing that? One of the first things that we have to talk about is how do you decide where you want to train and what is it going to look like? And much like different restaurants, every jiu-jitsu gym is different. You can walk into any gym and they're going to have different culture. They might have different emphasis. And something that not enough people talk about is how to assess the culture and make sure that it's a good fit before you show up and go in the door. Some jiu-jitsu gyms are very competitive and combat oriented. Maybe they view their gym more as a pipeline to competition or maybe a pipeline into MMA. And there's a place for that, but it's always good to make sure that you find a gym that translates to what you're looking for culturally. There still are many gyms that have that very combative mindset you described, where when a new person comes in, they try to demonstrate the effectiveness of their jiu-jitsu by just turning it into a war and just showing them, look at how badly I can beat you up. You got to train here. We're the best. But for the reasons we brought up, that actually turns out not to be the most effective way to teach and learn a skill. I would also argue it's not the most effective way to build a business and get new customers. I think the playful approach is better. So it's always important to understand when you're looking for a gym, what is the culture of this gym? What are they emphasizing? And how do they onboard their new customers? And I love this bit that you're talking about emphasizing that, like, if someone comes in the door, the one thing you want to make sure that they take away from this is not that we're the biggest or the baddest, but that we're the most playful. I think that is an awesome way to structure your culture. And I think it probably helps you really onboard new people a lot easier than if you tried to turn this into a fight pit or something like that.
And what seems so silly to me is that our members do well in competition. Like, I think if you want to have the best competitive gym, you should have the most playful gym, because like we've talked about it before, that's how you get good. That's where skill acquisition is developed. So I really, I think that's the way to do it. I do think that there's a difference between growth and performance. We have a competition class that is, more of an emphasis on being maybe a little bit less playful in those engagements. But I think day to day, the way that you train 99% of the time has to be play if you want to get good. And one thing you talked about is how different gyms kind of approach the sport. I think one thing I definitely want to talk about, one thing that's probably one of the biggest differentiators between us and most gyms, is that we treat it very seriously in terms, we put a lot of thought into how we teach and coach, and we don't run it as an ad hoc flying by the seat of our pants. Most jiu-jitsu gyms are run by people who love jiu-jitsu and are very good at playing the game. However, they don't necessarily love coaching jiu-jitsu or put any time into their classes, whether it's structure or content. It's pretty common to find gyms where the kids and fundamental programs are afterthoughts, where it's just like, oh, we'll throw anyone that is willing to do it for free, any blue belts, we'll just put them on the mat and coach whatever. As long as there's someone there, it doesn't really matter. It's just the fundamentals program. It's just the kids program. And at a lot of gyms, they don't have a program guide or curriculum. And there's this assumption that people will just learn how to play the game if they're given enough time on the mats. They also tend to run the advanced grappling classes as a place for them to show whatever ideas they're currently playing with in their game and work through problems with their students. And I'd say that for the majority of gyms, there's no introspection about their programs or classes. It takes a long time to get good enough at the sport to coach. And that timeline leads to people becoming deeply ingrained in whatever structure they're exposed to. So most coaches just coach however they were coached and haven't really taken the time to think about whether or not it's efficient or works well for most people. And there's also like often no rhyme or reason to class topics or structure. I've been to a lot of places where you show up, you do some random warm-ups, coach shows whatever happens to be on their mind with zero lesson planning. Maybe they even ask the class like, what do you guys want to work on? I guess maybe we'll show some triangles today. And then you static drill, which is basically choreographed sequence repetition for about 30 minutes. And then you spar with each other for about 30 minutes. I've had coaches tell me, hey, everything we worked on today isn't going to work in sparring because everyone's expecting it, but just keep trying and over time you'll get good at it. And to me, if we're showing stuff that's not going to work for the game that we're about to play, we should probably either change what we're playing or we should talk about something different. And lastly, there's normally no program for developing players as coaches. Most gyms operate with the idea that if you're good at the sport, you'll be good at coaching. But like I can speak from experience, I have coached well over 1,000 classes. It is a very different skill to coach jiu-jitsu than to play jiu-jitsu. And while it, being good at jiu-jitsu helps to coach, it's you almost have to be somewhat to be able to be a good coach. It is not the same skill set. And like I love the idea that there's infinite paths to perfection, but running a program like that is just not very good for students.
Yeah, you bring up some great insights there. People, I think, sometimes are inclined to look at competition records as the basis for determining who I want to train under. But although, as you mentioned, it's important to have a coach who knows jiu-jitsu well, there is a difference between my ability as a competitor versus my ability as a coach and a teacher and an instructor. And it's important to look holistically when you're deciding on a coach. That one coach might not be there every day. So you want to ask yourself, what is the culture like? What are the other people in the room like? What are the other coaches like? Is this person elevating the next generation of coaches? How do they onboard new customers? Is it a welcoming, friendly experience? Or do you really get the impression that the instructor just doesn't care? What about some of the other classes like kids programs? You brought that up. Do you get the impression that the coach is really thinking deliberately and carefully about how they can make this the best course they can? Or are they just taking one of their, junior belts and saying, hey, can you teach the kids class today? Or are they just writing it in and just kind of showing one or two random things without any real structure? These are all things that matter a lot because every coach is different, right? Something people need to understand about jiu-jitsu is that having a black belt is not some certified, accredited thing like having a CPA or having a law degree, right? A black belt just means you've been training long enough that some other black belt thought you were good enough and they gave you a black belt. And so you will see widely different approaches and skill levels across different black belts. You can't assume that just because you go to one school and they use an approach there, that every other school will use the same. And so my advice to people is always to put some thought into this, and try different gyms. Don't just go to the first gym that you go to. And I'm sure you would agree, right? Try around and get some exposure, and find out what the different gyms have to offer. But like you said, I think that you will find, whether you are someone looking to be a full-time, competitive, serious athlete in jiu-jitsu, or whether you're more like me and you're just looking to do jiu-jitsu for fun as a practice, I think you'll find a gym with a more welcoming, playful approach will always outperform. And I think what we see right now on the sport jiu-jitsu side of things actually aligns with that expectation too.
And it's definitely probably not good for business, but I tell people all the time when they come in for trials, I encourage them, try a few places, right? Like, make sure it's a big decision. I'm really confident in our programs, the way that we coach, our training partner level in the room, just our structure, everything in our environment. So, I feel confident being able to tell people, hey, go try other places, but, make sure that you try us too, because we're not going to be the best fit for everyone. And that's okay, right? Like, we're not trying to be the best gym for everybody. We're trying to be the best gym that we possibly can for the type of members that want to be at our gym, if that makes sense. So at Golden Jiu Jitsu, our focus, our classes are really like all of our classes, all of our programs use predominantly game-based structures where students have the opportunity to play around, fail, and learn from mistakes. We also lean very heavily towards concepts and away from prescriptive coaching, which I'm sure that probably resonates with you because your whole podcast system is about evergreen concepts that are, just as useful 10 years in as day one, right? It's just as useful now as the day that you recorded it 5 years ago. We find that those concepts are just so powerful. And really both of those facets of our focus are driven by a simple fact. We want to create dynamic problem solvers, not rote technique regurgitators. Not only is problem solving what makes the game so much fun, but it will also take you a heck of a lot further, a lot quicker than trying to memorize exact sequences that won't be, recreatable in live sparring with anyone that's decent at our sport. So we rarely use static drilling on our program. Pretty much everything is played as a game. Static drilling is pretty common at most gyms, but to me, it's not very much fun and it doesn't correlate to skill development as quickly. There's a lot of literature about the value of constraint-based games, oriented, class structures, but I'll just say this. Our grapplers get better much quicker than average for the sport. Most coaches, can take a highly athletic beginner with great balance and great proprioception and get them good in a fairly short amount of time. If you've been training for a long time, we've all heard about, like, oh man, break dancers or this, they come in with great balance and they just get good so quick. But our goal is to do that for everyone, no matter what their sports background is. So to do that, we rely heavily on concepts and heuristics to guide us in games, build out practical grappling skills, and instill playfulness in the room. That being said, we do coach each of our programs differently just because there's different goals for the various programs that we have at Golden Jiu Jitsu.
Makes sense. Now, obviously, you're speaking my language here, but for those who maybe haven't heard this language before, you might want to unpack it a bit. You talked about static drilling and concepts and being a dynamic problem solver. Why don't you expand a bit on what that means to you, and how that might be different from what people's expectations might be if they come into a martial arts gym for the first time?
So yeah, I would say, so static drilling is almost like, it's like a choreographed dance move, right? It's like, put your hand here, then put your leg here, then move them this way, then put your hand here, then we're gonna bring your leg over here, and then you transition here, and then boom, that's the technique. And I think that focus on internal language is not very useful. Internal language is like me telling you what to do with your hands, what to do with your feet, compared to external language being like, maybe I could cue someone from mat, like, don't let your training partner's head touch the mat. that would be external language. Or a metaphor that I would commonly use would be like T-Rex is don't tap. So I think that when we teach with static drilling, we teach with internal language. That's great stuff. If you're interested in that, highly recommend Doug Lemov, Teacher's Guide to Coaching, or maybe it's Coach's Guide to Coaching. He talks about language and coaching that I think is very, very valuable. But I think that that's probably the most common way that most places coach. If you go in, you're going to be shown some technique, some sequence. You're going to copy that sequence as best as you can. And then you're going to be set to go out and spar. And I think that it's not good for skill acquisition. It also, I think it's not fun. And it's just like, it can be a problem. Like I remember, like I've just seen so many things where it's like a coach shows me something, right? And it's like, here's this sequence. And then I try it and then it doesn't work for me. And I'm like, well, man, I stink at jujitsu. Like that didn't work at all. Why can't I manage to get this the way that they can get this? And I think that really brings us to like, everyone's different. Every time I do a move, it's slightly different. Everyone has different personal affordances. If you're new to grappling, you might not know what a berimbolo is, but basically a flashy looking spinning upside down back take movement. And that's probably not going to be accessible if you weigh 280 pounds. If you weigh 130 pounds, it's going to be a lot easier. So there, different things are going to work differently or, better or worse for various grapplers. And I think that we should structure our program, structure our classes in a way that puts that creativity in the hands of the athlete, that makes it to where they're able to explore and better gauge like what works for my body, what works for my game, and perhaps equally as importantly, what's the most fun. Like, at times I think like, especially for longevity in the sport, it's not always about what's the most effective. A lot of times for me, it's about like, what's the most fun? Like what makes me smile and laugh and want to spend time on the mats, because that's the key to getting good long-term.
Yeah, I agree completely. People have made themselves miserable trying to do the perfect study methods and the perfect techniques, but the only real surefire way to get good is to be consistent. And the only surefire way to be consistent over time is to be having fun. If you're not having fun, nothing else matters. I think a fun-based approach is really the cornerstone of every good gym that I've seen, and it sounds like you're totally on board with that. Something else you talked about that you use at Golden Jiu Jitsu, you talked about using things like constraints. And I would love to know what that means, because I think when most people envision what a martial arts class looks like, they imagine the instructor lining up everyone and making them just do 100 karate chops into the air all at the same time. Kind of reminds me of the Karate Kid, where it's like, sit here and, wax on, wax off 800 times, and suddenly you're going to be good at martial arts. And I think what we know is that really doesn't work. And the constraints-led approach, as they call it, is a science-backed method of learning skills better, faster. It's an emerging thing, and many gyms in jiu-jitsu are starting to adopt it. But tell me about how you guys do it at Golden Jiu Jitsu and what people should expect if they come in. How would a constraint-based games class look different from, say, everyone lines up and sensei makes you bow and do 100 karate chops, for example?
So there's a bunch of different ways that we incorporate constraints into our game. It's something that I think a lot about. Like, how do we, structure constraints in a game in order to essentially produce the outcomes that we're looking for? And we iterate constantly on our game library and how we play. One of the easiest to kind of wrap your head around for a beginner is something, we haven't done this in a while, but it's actually one of my favorite, is, for instance, trying to grapple with one hand, right? So that might be put your hand in your belt so you only have one hand. I've had members put tennis balls in their hands, so now you can't grab anything. And so it's like, instead of just telling someone, hey, you're not allowed to grab this, it's like we can constrain what they're physically able to do. Another good option is just telling people, like, you can't do this option. This option is no longer a viable option, whether that's it results in a loss or we just say that it's no longer an option. So, one constraint that we might have is, say, like, you're looking to pass the guard, right? And like we talked about earlier, guard is just where someone is is grappling with their legs. They're on bottom, either sitting on their butt or laying on their back, and the top person is kneeling or standing, and they're trying to pass the legs, get both legs on the same side of their body, and get chest to chest. That would be considered passing. So, we have a bunch of different things that we might do for that. We might say that the person on bottom is not allowed to grab the person on top. All right, so you can't grab with your fingers. We could say that they're not allowed to hook with their feet. So you're not allowed to pull on them with the top of your foot where your shoelaces would be, connecting that to their legs. We could say that the top person is not allowed to stand up. That could be a constraint. They can't have both knees off the ground at any time. We could make a constraint that, the top person is not allowed to pass around the legs. They have to go through the legs, through the gap in between the legs, in order to produce an outcome that we're looking for, a certain area of skill development. But really, there's a million and one ways that we can play constraints. One of my favorites as well is, I love this game from Back Control, where we just say the person on back is not allowed to submit, and they're not allowed to use their legs. So they're trying to maintain chest to back connection, but their legs are not allowed to come in front of their training partner, and they're not allowed to go for any submissions. And we're just looking to maintain chest to back connection. And I think you can learn a lot about maintaining chest to back connection when you kind of constrain the game, when you make the game smaller. You end up, you're able to isolate certain skills that you're looking to develop in your students and your members.
Yeah. Something that you touched on earlier, which is a key lesson in sports, is if you want to get people good, you need to maximize the amount of live practice they get. And the problem with people trying to win in the room is you're constantly stopping and restarting if you're actually trying to turn this into a combat match. Whereas if you're playing, both people are getting quality practice at the same time. I think that's another side benefit of this. You're just going to get more time together if you play a quality game like this, rather than just, again, doing the 100 karate chops against the air, as people might envision a martial arts class looks like. If you're doing a live game where you and someone else are playing around and trying to feel out how things work, that's just a really powerful way of getting a lot of exposure to these ideas so you can get good faster. And it also has the benefit of preventing cognitive overload in the student. These, poor people come into jiu-jitsu for the first time. They've never seen any of these techniques. And if you throw a million details at them, they're just going to get lost. But if you give people a simple game to play, you get them in there and you get them productive really quick, and you get them a lot of quality sparring time. And this allows them to, as you mentioned earlier, become really great live problem solvers, where they don't just memorize jiu-jitsu techniques, but they actually know jiu-jitsu. They know how to move their body safely and how to improvise and just make things work on the fly. That's a much more important way to learn to compete and to train than to just have things memorized, which usually is not a sustainable approach over the long term. And with all of that said, though, we've kind of talked about the method that you use at Golden. I'd also love to maybe dig a little bit more deep into the fundamentals program. You mentioned that many gyms don't really have this laid out, but you have a pretty cohesive and rigorous fundamentals program for new grapplers who are coming in. And I think if someone were either going into a different gym and maybe they just don't have that framework, or if someone is coming into Golden and they want to learn what they should expect on day one and maybe month one, year one, what does your fundamentals program look like, and how do you structure that and deliver information to your students there?
So what it looks like, I guess one of the things we could start with is what you said, what it looks like on day one, day two, et cetera. So when people come in, we have content that, we automatically send out before their first class, after their first class, after their second class, after their third class, to start onboarding progressively and smoothly into our program. So I think that's a huge part of what we do is we try and have a real onboarding program to get people up to speed, to make sure that we answer their questions, to make sure that they are comfortable and they're understanding what the goals are. And, there's not that fear of the unknown. Beyond that, I just want to reiterate, our goal for the fundamentals program is to create playful grapplers who are self-learning dynamic problem solvers, comfortable in all grappling engagements. And to achieve that, we really want to hit several distinct areas. We want to make sure that they're fun to play with, right? We want to make sure that we are on the same page about training mentality and we're developing good movement quality. Secondly, we really try and lean heavily for brand new fundamentals on conceptual models of grappling. So at the core of that, we use Biernacki's alignment model of base posture structure, and we use the core mechanics of jiu-jitsu from, I believe, you and Biernacki. So like, what is a hook? What is a wedge? What is a post? What is a frame? What is a lever? And we look at those core mechanics of grappling, and we speak in that language to make sure that as students are playing, we want them to be able to explain the why and how of what is happening. Like, what is my arm doing right now? My arm is a frame. What is their arm being used for? Right now, their arm is being used as a lever, right? We want people to be able to understand the mechanics. And we really treat all of our program at the very core of it is alignment and those core mechanics. Past that, we have core concepts that we look at. So like this week, one of our topics is guard passing from half guard for fundamentals. So some core concepts that we talk about in that are the ladder system, the placeholder system. Those are really great ones. I have another system that I use that I call the 4 leg configurations for guard passing, which is not a good name. I probably need to work on that. But, we try and treat it as these systems being the core of what we're looking for in the fundamentals program. And lastly, we look at, in terms of concepts, we look at positionally related concepts. And that's, kind of what we're talking about with those guard passing concepts. So fun to play with, conceptual models of grappling. And then the third main thing is vocabulary, right? So vocabulary, like what are the position names? What are the grips? What are the movement pathways? We want to be able to speak about jiu-jitsu with each other. And a huge part of that is having a common language to have conversations. So those are kind of the core things that we have in our curriculum that's exposed publicly. So like when you join Golden Jiu Jitsu, or if you do a trial, you have access. This is our curriculum. This is what we're working off of. You can look at it before classes. You can look at it to review after classes. And if you don't want to study, you don't have to. You don't have to look at it at all. But we want to make sure that it is accessible for people that want to, right? If you have questions, we want to make sure that you have something to lean back on, both for students and for coaches, to have a consistent both class structure, topics, concept library, so that coaches are able to answer questions and that like all of our coaches speak in a common language on all of the topics that we're playing. And then in class, we look to develop practical grappling skills, right? And so in order to develop the first 3, those the conceptual models of grappling, vocabulary, and fun to play with, we have a lot of stuff in curriculum. And then also for all of these 4, including practical grappling skills, in class, we develop those via constraint-based games. So we like to give students a game and predominantly pair those games with tasks related to concepts, right? So for example, we might have a standing game where both players are looking to wrap their hands around each other's torso. So we might pair that with concepts about head positioning or off balancing or frame lever battle. We might add in a second win condition of getting to a grip called a Russian arm, and that might be to build vocabulary. To teach playfulness, we do a lot of low risk games where only one person can win, right? There's a lot of good names for this. Some people call it designated winner. I like the Biernacki term, fuck your jiu-jitsu, personally. But there's a lot of various games that allow us to play deep in these positions, understand the scale of resistance and intensity that you can give while playing, and build skills like balance and body awareness, which are often considered intangibles in the sport. And then to build practical grappling skills, we might play more open-ended games around a specific position and let students explore, succeed, fail, and learn. So that's kind of our fundamentals program at the highest level. Those are the things we try and stress. We have a curriculum that's built out that students are able to access, that have each week, it has content on the various topics that we're covering, with links to podcasts, with links to instructions on submeta and other sources, with various articles, with YouTube videos, to make sure that there's a library of content both for coaches to ensure consistency and students to be able to accelerate skill development if they are interested.
Can I just ask you a question here, Avery? You've got a pretty well-defined and thoughtful curriculum that you set up here. My experience is that some gyms, especially the gyms with very thoughtful coaches, may put something like this together, but still, I would say most jiu-jitsu gyms are kind of just winging it in terms of how they provide content to their students. What is your background exactly? How did you learn to put all of this stuff together? Because I'm guessing that you've got a pretty interesting backstory in terms of the skill set that you've developed off the mats.
Yeah, so I've worn many hats. My main background, I guess, as it relates to this, I've had several small businesses, and in that, I've learned some key lessons. One of the things I worked on was I built a system, worked with Waldorf and Montessori school systems to teach music with color, right? So basically colorizing both sheet music and tablature for guitars and pianos, trying to, play with various methods of learning, and just test and iterate. So I've looked a lot at teaching from that aspect. I've had companies that are more software as a service. Some have done okay, some have done absolutely miserably. And from that, I've learned a lot about like operating procedures and just making sure that you have libraries. I've learned about, I think the biggest problem with service-based industries is inconsistent service, right? So that's a main tenet for our coaching, is like, how do we have coaching, coaches that we bring up? So one thing that I pride myself on, and I pride our gym on, is that we have an actual training program for coaches, right? And it takes some time to go through. So we pay our coaches to go through our training program. We don't just put them in a class and say, take over. We say, here's these contents. I have books like Rob Gray's How We Learn to Move. We pay coaches to read that book and have conversations about that book. Like, I will pay you to read this book and talk with me about it, because I want to have this consistency and this cohesive vision in the gym to where we're all working towards common goals. Beyond that, my day job is I do IT consulting. I build custom software integrations. And a huge part of that is being able to build things where you can actually hand them off to other people. So I've spent a ridiculous amount of time writing documentation on things that the goal isn't to cover someone's butt, but it's to make sure that someone can actually use that. And then lastly, I've studied design engineering. I actually went back to school. I studied electrical engineering and mathematics before. Now I'm back at Mines. And so I'm in the design engineering program. I have one more semester, and there's a huge emphasis there on systems, process design, and actually solving problems in meaningful ways. So those are kind of the main aspects of my background that have kind of contributed to my view on how we coach from personal background. And the other kind of additional things is that I've just spent a ridiculous amount of time trying to learn how to be a better coach. I think it's learning how to be a good coach is the same as learning anything else. You do stuff, you make mistakes, you go find out what other people are doing, you use introspection, and you try and see, okay, what are the problems that people are having? And you talk with people, right? You talk with your white belts, you talk with your blue belts, you talk with your upper belts regularly. And you ask, what are their frustrations? And not just talking, but watching what they do, watching how they act, watching are they studying? What are they studying? Is it working for them? What would work better? And then, can I build something quickly that'll help them? And then once you build it, let's test it. Did that work? Did it not work? How can we improve? So I know that's a mouthful, a long kind of semi-rant, but does that kind of answer or give some color to it?
100%. I think quite clearly your background is very similar to mine. And I think that's why I appreciate it so much. When you say things like, you actually pay your instructors to learn skills that sounds from a business perspective to be like an obvious thing, but in jiu-jitsu, it's still relatively rare. And I can tell from your background here, you're someone who's put a lot of thought into how to build this up sustainably, how to create processes that are repeatable, how to create systems and structures that will get the maximum value to your students and customers. So I just asked because it seemed like you had a skill set that kind of led to all of this.
Totally, totally. Yeah, it's something, and also just it's just something that I'm really passionate about. Like we talked earlier about like, why do you do this for the love of the game? But really, like, I love jujitsu. This is the most fun thing I've ever played, most fun thing I've ever done. And I love working on our curriculum. I love working on how do I make this more efficient? How do I make this more value to our customers to try and make sure that I'm doing the best job I can as a coach, which I think should be distinguished from the best job that I can at getting good at jujitsu.
Now, Avery, we should probably also talk about what more advanced practitioners should expect. So we've talked already about what your fundamentals program looks like and what to expect if someone is a new beginner to jiu-jitsu, but I know that you've also got an advanced program. How does that check out?
So I would say the biggest difference is how we structure our topics. So the fundamentals program covers several types of engagements every day. So like in a single fundamentals class, we cover 2 to 3 topics, and we rotate the positions for each. So like this week, yesterday, we covered half guard passing and mount. So we played games from those 2 positions, talked about concepts, and it's an hour-long class. The advanced class, for the fundamentals class, those topics will rotate every week, right? So like we have those topics for this week, and as well as like a head and arm triangle, and we're doing some wrestling engagement stuff. Whereas the advanced program has the same topic for a whole month. And that, might change. We've looked at doing 2 weeks per topic, 3 weeks, a whole month. We play around depending on the complexity of the topic, but we do stay stagnant for a set amount of time. That's much longer than the fundamentals. So that gives us time to really deep dive into the nuances of various positions and learn a lot more about them than we can manage in the fundamentals program. Something that you mentioned before is cognitive overload. My favorite saying about that, it's actually in our coach's guide. I got it from you, which is you chase 5 rabbits, you catch none, right? So you can't, especially when someone's a beginner, we can't talk about that many things in between rounds, because if we do, it just leads to less skill acquisition and development. In the advanced program, we go into more details. So the more you know about a given topic, the easier it is to learn new information about that topic. And in many ways, the fundamentals program is meant to build the scaffolding that we flesh out in the advanced program. So we try our best to streamline our content for the advanced program around high percentage ideas and movement pathways pulled from well-organized high-level content sources. This is primarily to allow students to self-study at the same time if they wish to do so, but it's also to ensure that we're not just showing low percentage nonsense that doesn't work. That being said, I always encourage playfulness. When people do stuff, it's like, I will pretty much never tell you that something is wrong or a bad idea. I might be like, here's the pros and cons, but I'm not going to tell you like, that'll never work, because it probably will. But we recently went over arm bars in our advanced program, and, we were able to play games related to breaking grips, submission mechanics, building up vocabulary, like, start in this arm bar. Here's the names of 9 different Jujigatami variations, armbar configurations. Transition to as many as possible. The person on bottom wins if they escape their elbow or build height to their knees. And while you transition, each time you transition to a new one, say the name of that position. So that's like a game that we played to build out the vocabulary, right? And learn the differences between those various armbars positions. We play games around entries to these positions and a lot more. And that's just something that's not possible in the fundamentals program. Studying one thing always comes at the cost of not working on all of the other topics and positions you could be looking at. And then lastly, for that advanced program, we have a semi-democratic method for picking topics at Golden Jiu Jitsu. So me and the other coaching staff select potential topics based off of what we're seeing in the room. And we have a team Discord, and we put polls in there. We post it, and students vote on what they want to study. Occasionally we do override it. Our students have neglected to select guard retention 6 times in a row. So We're probably going to override that next month. They wanted to work on legs again this month. But that's kind of the main difference for the advanced program and that fundamentals program is just the ability to deep dive both because the advanced program, our expectation, if you're in that room, anyone is welcome. But if you're in that room, we're teaching to higher level people. So we're going to go over more topics. If you don't know a lot about jujitsu, it's going to be hard to keep up and you're going to get less return on investment for your time. But we're able to deep dive and really play and build a deep channel rather than a broad and narrow one.
Got it. That makes sense. Now, how would someone know which course they're supposed to go into? Do you divide this by experience level, belt ranking? Is it kind of just like a personal feeling? When would someone be put into the fundamentals program versus the advanced program? Or is that something that you rely on the student to self-assess based on their goals?
We treat it as a conversation. So there's not like anyone is welcome in the advanced program. That being said, if they haven't grappled much before, we recommend that they spend 6 months focusing on the fundamentals program before they transition to the advanced. The main reason for that is we just want to build out that common vocabulary, those core concepts. We want people really to understand, what are those core concepts? What are the core mechanics? What is alignment? All those things that we cover more so in the fundamentals program. That being said, it is welcome to everyone. And if we get people that have come in, we have people that have come in and joined our gym. We have several people who have joined as purple belts, right? And so they hop into advanced. But even them, I tell them, I'd recommend coming to some fundamentals programs because the language that we use is not necessarily something that you're familiar with, even if you've been grappling for 10 years. So, or go study it in your free time. Here's all of the resources, you make that decision. So we treat it as a conversation. Like I said, anyone's welcome to come to advanced class, but I will tell people, I'll make suggestions basically like you're going to get more return on your investment for time. And then lastly, like I won't slow down for you too much. If you're a beginner, you've been grappling for 2-3 months, you come to the advanced program, I'm not going to tell you that you can't come. But if you ask questions at times where it's like, this isn't a good question for the rest of the room's skill acquisition and where they're all at, I might say, hey, I'll answer that later, but right now I want to focus on this. And then I'll go try and address that as much as I can, depending on the time that we have in class.
Makes sense. What about kids programs? How do these fit into the curriculum at Golden? We talked earlier about just the power of jiu-jitsu as a tool for kids. Where does that fit in at your school?
So yeah, our kids program is very different than the adult programs in that we care about building up capable grapplers, but we care the most about building them up as an individual. So when a kid graduates from our program, we want them to be well-rounded. We want them to have a good sense of self-esteem, be able to handle their emotions, have well-developed self-control, be respectful and polite to others, communicate effectively with others, be physically fit, which to us means age-appropriate cardio and strength, instilling a love of exercise and sports, and have well-developed balance and proprioception. And lastly, we want them to be inoculated against hardship and know that they can overcome obstacles. So with that end goal in mind, we do have our program goals separated by age, each with life skills and grappling skills that we hope to instill in our youth program. And lastly, our kids program does have some fundamental physical literacy skills that are solo based that we don't really stress in the in the adult programs. So like we do like forward rolls and backwards rolls. We sometimes with kids, we do cartwheels or handstands for a warm up. And our adult program, our warm-up is like 2 minutes of warm-up for the fundamentals program. It's like jogging based. So it's like jog, butt kickers, inside shuffle, outside karaoke, outside karaoke before we hop in, just to make sure that the body temperature is risen so that we lower the risk of injury. And then we immediately get into grappling. We could have a whole long conversation about why we do it that way, but the main thing is I would just say it's constraints-led approach basis of like we want to spend our time developing practical grappling skills as much as possible. That's what we prioritize. And then in the advanced program, our warm-up is just 5 minutes of flow roll. But the youth program, we do have some of those solo-based physical literacy skills. And that's, because we really want to develop a lot of different things and have them see progression of those skills over time as like a constant metric so that they can see development. And it's just things that I think are important for kids. And we also play a lot of games to increase fun at the risk of decreasing 100% transferable skills. Like we play a game called the Doc game. We play a game called the Sock game. We play a sumo game that it was pretty cute. One of the kids yesterday called it Ring of Fire Death Push Out wrestling game. When he was talking to another kid yesterday. But yeah, that's because for the kids program, we want to prioritize longevity, fun, and skill development above all else. And we just want to make sure that we're setting up children for a lifetime of fun training and not burning them out in a season or two.
Makes sense, man. That makes perfect sense. Well, last thing I want to ask you here is help me put together an info packet that people like us probably wish we would have had before we ever started jiu-jitsu. And that is what to expect when you actually come in. So if someone has listened to this and they think, you know what, I'm in, this is exactly what I'm looking for. What should they expect? What does it look like to come in for your first day? How do they go about doing that? And maybe beyond that, any thoughts in general on just how to overcome the natural fear that comes with trying something new like jiu-jitsu, which often seems very scary the first time you go? I would definitely want to hear your thoughts on all of this.
So I would say the biggest thing, expect to play a lot of games and have a lot of fun. Expect to lose games when you're trying them for the first time. And just remember, it's just a game. We're playing. It's not a fight and it's not a competition. We play a combat sport, but the key word there is play, right? The training room is for playful training. If you want to compete, I'm happy to help guide you through that process. And I will be your most vocal supporter along the way, but we don't compete in our training room. Our goal for your first 5 to 10 classes is to get you up to speed on how to be a good, playful training partner. That means controlling your breathing, regulating how tense you are, and getting used to the idea that grappling in the training room is just a fun game. Before you come in, sign up for a trial on our website. Our trial is $7 for 7 days right now for a 1-week trial. When you sign up for that, we have automated messages that are sent out with links to great resources on that mindset of playful training. We have podcasts that will be sent out to you that you're welcome to listen to, and articles and other resources that it's like, here's what we're looking for. Here's how to kind of get into that mindset. And once you do that trial, it's a great way to basically have a low barrier to entry to try the sport for that $7 for 7 days. We have loaner clothes for you to wear when you come in, and we should be good to go at that point. That trial on our website, the waiver doesn't take long, but we also have a document on band techniques that's part of the sign up process. We have a hygiene guide in that process. In that automated message. And just regardless of even if you've trained before, every gym has different guidelines. So please check that out, regardless of where you're coming from and how long you've been training. And I would say that's the biggest thing. Just, sign up, come in and try some classes. There is absolutely no substitute to doing classes at a gym in person to see if you're like it. And if you're not ready for that yet, just reach out, right? Just give us a call, text, or email, and I will answer any other questions that you might have, or at least do my best to do so.
Well, that sounds amazing, man. I think that regardless of who the listener is here, where they come from, I think this is a great introductory guide to what is jiu-jitsu, why do I train it, what does good look like, what to expect. So this is the kind of thing that I wish I had, so that someone had given to me when I started out. And it sounds like if people are interested in training at Golden, one of the smartest things for them to do is just to get the ball rolling, because you've got a good sign-up offer. And it sounds like you've also got a lot of other info packets that you can provide to people so that they are better equipped when they come in on their first day. But with that said, if someone is in Colorado, they've listened to this, they found it persuasive, they want to get to know you and try out your gym, where do we send them? How do they go about finding you?
Best way, the way that most people find us is get on Google Maps and search Golden Jiu Jitsu, or just, Google us Golden Jiu Jitsu. Our website is goldenjj.com. Our Instagram stuff, I am not as good with social media and Instagram as I should be. But our Instagram handle is golden_jiu-jitsu. If you want to reach out there, our phone number is 303-578-0198. You can call that. That's our Google Voice number. So if you call that, it'll ring my phone, or send me a text message at that number. And you can also, there's a contact form on our website, like I said, at goldenjj.com. So any one of those options is a great way to reach out. Or if you do decide to just show up at least 15 minutes early and fill out the trial stuff, because it will take a second.
Yeah, makes sense. I guess the advice I would have to people who are listening to this, trying to kind of talk themselves up into trying something scary and new for the first time, is try not to overthink it. Just do it. The hardest part of any new endeavor is the fear of the first step, taking the first step. What you will find, and what so many other people have found, is after you've done your first jiu-jitsu class, it just won't be that scary anymore. You understand what it is. You realize it's probably not as terrifying as you might have thought. And it opens up the door to you to a whole bunch of other life-improving skills and practices that you probably didn't have before. So my suggestion is always to give people, or to people who want to try jiu-jitsu, just do it. Just go. And like you said, it sounds like the best way to find all of your stuff, your gym, to contact you, everything is at goldenjj.com. So I would suggest that people just open up their browser and go there right now. If people want more content like the stuff that we're doing here, that's, I guess, where our stuff comes in. BJJ Mental Models is, to the best of my knowledge, the top education podcast for jiu-jitsu. We've got a lot of other content like this, and it's almost all free. So you can go to BJJ Mental Models for that. But Avery, man, this was an amazing chat. Thanks a lot for coming by and sharing all of this. I think it's a great introduction to your practice and really goes into detail about how you engineered a gym based on best practices that you drew from both inside the sport and outside.
Totally. Thank you so much for talking with me today, and helping me out with this. I really, really appreciate your time and help.
You are welcome, sir. And thanks to everyone for listening to this. We appreciate that too. Take care.